part two. And we are going to be looking at soil health. So Saturday we talked about the grass and the birds and the what they need in terms of the grassland habitat. And we can definitely talk more about that today. But we've got Cameron and Patrick here that are going to talk more about the underground, the importance of what's underground. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with us, we are a nonprofit land trust. We work throughout Columbia County. And our mission is to bring people together to conserve, engage, and appreciate the outdoors. And so one of the ways that we do that is through these conservation areas. And Ooms is one of 10 properties that we own and manage for public recreation and wildlife habitat. And so I'm going to turn it over to Cameron to get started on what we're here to learn today.
All right. So, if you guys touch on, do you feel like, I guess one thing I'm saying, like, what did some of you guys that were here last time feel like you left with? Okay. Or anything of note, anything you kind of stuck with here? Awesome. Pat, do you mind touching briefly on the grazing and how that fits into the goal of the strategy?
Yeah, I'll kind of briefly start. So my name is Pat. I'm the public land manager, and I live in the position. What we're hoping to kind of talk about today and understand better through the sampling is the effects of elements, especially as we make decisions to change our management styles. We want to make sure that we're impacting both things above the surface in terms of the grass species, the bird species, but also we're wanting to do our part to contribute to soil health, because we know that grassland can play an important part in sequestering carbon and filtering water, all of these things that we know about. So we want to, as we walk, we'll look at some different kind of management regimes that we have here. We can talk about kind of our hope as we mix in some variants to those management practices, and we'll talk about how we're going to use soil analogy to kind of better understand our impact.
And so I'm sure, like, for those of you who are here, a little bit about the tools of how this is being managed is for specific for nesting grassland birds is using mowing, and we're going to be introducing cows with a local farmer who has on the back side next to our land, so it's like a really first wall, so he's right there. And then and kind of seeing how those different management tools work. So a lot of the soil part that we're looking at is we're at a point of like learning more about it, and we'll be doing testing and observation over time, looking at those different management strategies to see how they work on this people. Then one thing I'm interested in is where a little bit of like where you guys are at with soil. Have any of you guys done any soil testing before? All right, and I was on your okay, yeah, so you did like the same thing. Okay, so we're gonna start. Okay. Okay. So I'll talk just a little bit briefly about kind of why soil is important. I imagine you guys know that too, but very briefly, like the way I like to think about soil is it's this like giant, like amazing digester that's on the surface of of our earth. It's just really impressive in that it kind of takes everything, you know, everything comes from it and everything goes back to it. And a lot of what we want to learn about and understand and work with is how to help those cycles function the best way that they can. Because they're going to function because it's an amazing ecosystem. But in this specific situation where we're here, it's kind of like having a management goal, and then how do we support that soil cycle to make sure it's working the best that it can to achieve these goals that we're aiming for. Another thing that I think is important to think about in any sort of land management when thinking about soil is how things are shifting, that we're getting a little more drought, a little more flooding. And so soil health and like keeping presence on your land can really buffer that intensity of what's going on with stress. Goes in both directions. Like if you have like good functioning soil, it can both buffer through drought and it can buffer through flooding. So that's another thing to think about as we're managing land and as you guys are thinking about how you're managing it. Yeah.
So my land is rock with a thin layer of soil on top of it. Is it similar or is it
We could probably touch on that, because that'll be like the next thing, but we can step into that. So kind of the next step is like, as we're looking at this, and I guess one thing to say too, and like kind of following up with what Pat was saying, is like a lot of the first part of this was like focusing on above ground management, and this one's a little bit focusing on below ground management. So if we're looking at this, and then if we're looking at your specific piece of land, a lot that's important is kind of get that broad perspective of what they're dealing with. And we'll have some packets that we can hand you guys, but we use soil maps to get a sense of like what the soil is. And then if you use something like Web Soil Survey, which is a great resource, you can see what those soils are and how they behave. So I think I may go a little bit more into that over there, but a lot of what the information that you get about that, and I'll show you guys too, is we don't have in that like through inventory or so you can even on paper before you even like look at anything on the ground, you get a sense of like, okay, I'm really just dealing with the soil, or you can get a sense of like water. You also get a better idea of water. But then again, important thing to realize is soil is something that's built over thousands and thousands of years, and so you can have some shifts, but it might be outside of like a span time frame that you're interested in. So it's learning that broad, what are the basics of the soil, so then you can kind of get a sense of like, okay, here's the potential. I can shift it within here, but I can't shift it within that. So a lot of that is getting to know what that is, so you can know what you can do. Because yes, that rock may shift over to you, but thousands of years.
Are you looking at land that is similar to today?
Good question. No, this is, so the soil type, and we can touch on this more as we go further, like the specific soil type that we're dealing with. We're dealing with Casanova silt loam. And so that is the main characteristics of that are 5 to 16% slope. So it also gives you a sense of like, if you're thinking of nutrient movement, like if you think of a lot of like farmland, what are farmland soils, they're areas where there was water sitting once, or they're in like floodplains. And so that's where a lot of the silty nutrients eventually with gravity and over time are slipping down to. So if you are dealing with something that has a slope, you may need to be, your management may need to focus on like nutrient addition, because that's just going to keep moving down. This is also, gives an idea of steps to be better off with
It may not have a depth to bedrock.
Listen, Matthew.
Yeah, it may not have a depth to soil because they sort of bottom out sometimes. And sometimes you'll have like a really deep soil. It'll say like 80 plus inches, more silt loam. So they're giving you like a soil horizon profile. So they're telling you like, as you go down, what can you expect to see? And so some of them you just don't hit bedrock.
Yeah, true.
Really, really deep.
So like in this one, there's a section of properties and qualities, and in that there's depth to restrictive feature. And so for this soil class, it's more than 80 inches. So very different from this.
Probably, relatively speaking, like land in Columbia County is probably like stonier, like yours, compared to what we got in like the Midwest. You see these like photos of root changes that go down like 12 feet in and then even on this property, like where we're standing here, we're much closer to light than I see around.
What is bedrock? Is it like solid rock, or is it something really more, so there's a lot of gravel?
You may have a
I'm not going to be able to give you an exact answer. My understanding is it's, I think for web soil survey purposes, it's usually once you hit rock, that's not just like a big boulder. They make a distinction between like, okay, you have a rocky soil, so it just has rocks in the profile, versus, oh, it's nothing but rock. What that rock looks like depends on what the underlying geology is. Some rocks might just be a solid, chunk, and other times you may have like a lot of fissures and cracks and crevices, but it still might be bedrock. It probably depends on what the bedrock is, And even like in our region, it's most often like a pretty big chunk of like shale, bluestone, like down near Franklin, the southern part of the county, there's sections where you'll have limestone first, but around here.
Right, you can start heading to where we're going to look at the finish. And if questions come up later, after Heidi come up, you guys will each have like a map to look at, so you have a better sense of what we're talking about and what we're looking at. But to go back to kind of this broader perspective, I guess one question I have is like, does anyone have any observations that they would like to share as we were walking up? That was your opinion.
This is more just a question. I know that like invasives tend to pop up where the clearance has happened, but there's a lot of invasives along the path with soil. Have anything to do with, invasives taking root and spreading, or is that not involved with the soil at all?
I think the broad answer, as far as invasives go, is a lot of the reason that they are invasive is because they're a really, I guess a lot of it is because a lot of them tend to prolong with disturbance. And so we do tend to create a lot of disturbance, and they're adaptable in those disturbed areas. So it doesn't necessarily have to do with soil. Each like plant species has its own kind of like ideal niche that it fits. And so there can be some indicators. Some are super flexible. They never really give you a whole lot of information. So let me give an example. Yeah, I don't have a good example off the top of my head. But generally it's more disturbance related. Yeah.
Was there, so it's looking right here, like 7 different species of grasses.
Yeah.
Right here.
Mhm.
That's pretty good.
Nice. Which is great. Yeah, I think they're
I don't know if they're all, how many are invasive or how many are.
sure. And I am not amazing at my graph identification. Yeah, and then there's, the different goldenrods. But a lot of, and I think what I'm kind of aiming for now is like there's a lot of just kind of like basic foundational things that you got to start out with, and then like if you do want to get into like I think species identification and like even get that next layer. But I think kind of getting the broad understanding of soil and what like even just knowing like okay there's 7 different species here like that's great to even just be able to know that, and then watch over time like are those shifting or one of them moving out or new ones coming in. To get an idea of how you want to manage based on what your goal is. So a broad rule of thumb that we're monitoring as we're looking at this land, that is density and diversity. So soil is, the way I like to think about it is just like a pretty broad bank that's available. And then based on the conditions, the species, different things are kind of choose like a buffet or like choosing what they want. So our goal is to kind of just make sure that, like in a monoculture, you've got one species that's pulling the same thing over and over again, so a nutrient's going to get depleted. Whereas if you have multiple species that's pulling different things, some species might be putting in, but another species is going to be pulling out. So a lot of what's helpful is that we're aiming for is diversity of what's here. Knowing that soil is going to work towards balance. So if we can have it as diverse as possible and as healthy as possible, the plants that grow on it are going to be healthier. The birds that rely on those plants, the animals eating those plants are going to be healthier. You're going to be healthier. So a lot of that is foundational in the soil. And I come from a farming background, and a lot of farming there is focus on the plants, but really are mainly focused on the soil because if you have healthy soil, you're going to have healthy plants. And then also that reminder of this connection of us to the soil that I think is sometimes hard to remember because there is so much disconnect between our foods, but just knowing that what's in this soil and then what we eat off of the soil directly goes into us and directly affects our health. So just again, kind of thinking of that, we're also part of that nutrient cycling. To not forget that we're outside and managing it, we are inside and part of it.
A quick question, Cameron.
Yeah.
When you talk about diversity, are you considering insects and bacteria as well?
Yeah. So it's kind of same concept. If you have healthy soil, it's going to be able to support those, those diverse bacteria, those diverse fungi, all of that. Yeah. And then if you do have something because a lot of invasives are coming from an imbalance. So if you work towards that balance, even if it's a pest, a pest insect, and thinking about having this pest box, if this was something that, we're dealing with, what's a good one? Almost like predator insects. Yes, you have a lot of aphids, but you also have a lot of ladybugs, and they'll keep it in balance. That idea of, you've got the prey and the predators. And same with soil. You've got the prey and the predators in there too. Okay.
So Cameron, Heidi was thinking that we should maybe get samples of here and maybe compare them to leftover.
Okay. How's everyone doing?
Good, thank you.
Okay. Okay. So I'll pass this around. So this is, a map that, we create maps like this that go over where the soil is and what soil types are here. So this is a map of the whole Ooms property. Where we are in Vermont. So we're amongst this hedgerow in here. So we're very solidly in this kind of soil type. So step one, knowing where you are, what soil you have. Step two is doing something like web soil survey to get some very basics about that soil. And that's just about the soil class, not so much about like this soil with grassland here. And when you're thinking about it, and as you're looking into like soil testing, there's the chemical properties, the physical properties, and the biological properties. The chemical properties are what you're getting information on when you send in a soil sample. So to me, I like to think about that just like with blood work. It's just kind of like capturing a moment in time what's there. When you're looking at the physical and the biological, then you're starting to get into like how is it relating and how is it functioning. So what we're looking at today is the physical and the biological.
Is the chemical nutrient and pH?
Yeah. So there's a bunch of different tests out there that you can choose what you would like to get. Some of them you can specifically choose like which ones you want. There's like basic packages that, you know, that are like phosphorus, potassium, magnesium, and a few more, as well as like, yeah, those are the basics, pH. And then you can go all the way down to if you're worried about heavy metals, you can test for heavy metals. There's a whole kind of slew of options out there. So that just gives you like, okay, there's calcium in the soil. But then say if I learn about my pH affects how nutrients can be absorbed and if there's lead in the soil. So say you have a lot of calcium, but your pH, I just give you an random example, your pH is off. Plants might not actually be able to get the calcium. So that's where you start looking at those other components and how they relate. So then kind of briefly touch on like what the soil type here is. And the keys that I find helpful in that, some information that I can help with and is not too much, is like getting a sense of the slope, if it's specifically particularly the team, as well as like depth to a restricted feature. You can get some information about this is well-drained soil, like what the clay to the inlet slope loam is. If it's clay, like the more clay you have, which is the tiniest particles, the more it's going to hold water. The standard is larger particles, the more you're going to lose water. If you're losing water, you're most likely those nutrients might be in the water, you're actually going to be losing nutrients. So that's kind of what you see about how to interact with it. Okay, so then we grab, you can kind of do this stuff.
And the last part that I just want to touch on is kind of, there's another management, we kind of get into the management differences between this section of land over here and like, essentially how we break this property into three of those pieces. So right now, where we're standing is the area that was mowed most recently. So we mowed the whole field last fall. And that is part of like a 3-year rotation where this fall, the furthest over towards the gazebo and boardwalk will be the section that's going to get mowed. And
How do you time the mowing?
so we time it with relation to the grassland bird nesting. So,
In the broader sense, but do you time it at all?
we don't. And that I think is one of the challenges of this management practice is, you know, so we're wanting to still grassland birds. We're not wanting to like send mowers through the field and be disruptive to their nest during their window. But so what it does is by that time of the year, which is late summer, early fall, all of the grasses have kind of gone through their entire life cycle, and now we're seeing these spores that have already flowered and gone to seed. And forbs are the leafy, flowery plants, not grasses, but goldenrod before. And here we have spotted knapweed, multiflora, ringostrata, you know, usual stuff. And I think with that delayed mowing schedule, that's one of the effects that we have is that we're actually like encouraging it to become like a goldenrod. So one of the ways that we're trying to mix it up is trying to better understand how grazing can support grassland birds. And I think that grazing could also support their health. And there's a lot more variables in grazing than in mowing. A variable in mowing is like the height that you set the deck to, and the kind of wood that's in there. So with grazing, we have the animal units, meaning the pounds of animals per acre, and that's per time too. Is when we talk about animal units, it's the animal units per day, and that could be several days. My background is also in agriculture, that's me, livestock agriculture, and I've sometimes moved groups of animals from paddock to paddock. I've often 4 times a day, depending on the desired effect. There's also rest period, so the time between grazing, I think, is probably the biggest variable that can affect. And post-grazing residual, essentially how much grass and forage is there when you put cows or whatever else out of doing that. So I think that as we continue to work with Henry on grazing that field, we're going to be really trying to understand the effects of these different variables and try to find the best management practices with grassland birds, but also to have the best effects on
With what's going up here in the first year after you mowed it? Your first and what was here when you mowed it in the fall?
I think so, yeah.
To me, it was very, a lot of woody plants. I didn't see that much grass out here at all.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that the best thing, if we were only thinking about the grass, the best thing to do for this field right now, if we want more grass to grow, would be to mow it or graze it low. Because this is, right now, it's a fruit stage, which is this last leaf out right before this starts to go to seed. So if you were to, grass is amazing, because if you were to cut it back there, it would do that again. And that, and while it's doing that, just putting energy into its roots, building soil, and as soon as it goes to seed, everything kind of contracts and goes up into that seed head, which is really when you're thinking about a lawn, you don't have to worry about as much in terms of the multicolor rows, the woody, or the plant, because you're doing that thing that grass loves, which is actually maintaining it, keeping it vegetative. Keeping it vegetative means keeping it in the leafy stage rather than the leafy. Obviously, mowing right now isn't an option. Right now, some of the bottlenecks is just starting to build their net, and that's why we protect that. But I do think that there is a density that we can do the field at, where they could. It's not like a broad application where they're through cutting this area. They're picking their hunting modeling by grazing sampling, and we can play with density, we can play with the residual, all these different variables in a way that I think could be with the grass and bird, and with the grass, which I'm not a bird expert, but I feel like grass and bird.
But why, if you're trying to manage forbs, why would you not mow every year? I mean, I understand you're not mowing early because of the birds, but why not mow every September? Just cost.
Cost is definitely a factor, and that's also something that we trying to understand better in terms of developing management practices. Down at Overmountain in Ingram, there are sections that we do mow every year, and I think that land actually is more suited for that. The opposition. That could definitely be an option here. It'll just end up being 3 times the cost. We'll have to figure out how to fundraise better. And but that's definitely.
Isn't there something about the insects that nest in the taller grasses, so that's why you don't mow them every year? That was my understanding.
That could play a part in it too. Yeah, and I often say, like, when making these management decisions, you have to be ruthlessly decisive in a way. You have to pick the habitat that you're aiming for and kind of, really be almost tunnel vision on that. Obviously, like, this would be a really healthy forest too, if we let it be. But we've decided that for several reasons, like trying to compare the grass, which grass and birds, they do appreciate this, like, heterogeneity, which includes another species, plants with different stages of habitat. They afford to different insects, characteristics of well.
Are you going to graze this with cows or sheep?
We're probably never going to do this section right here. But the back section that most people don't even know is going to be great cattle.
If you can say a little more about, I think, what you mentioned earlier about
Sure. Maybe I'll like project and we can walk and talk back that way if Cameron feels it's a good time. So.
Yeah, if you can say a couple things before we walk back. The two NRTS is their infield cropland assessment. We've had some a tool to look at what influence of what we're looking at. Something else to note is that a lot of this is pretty subjective. There's not so much like it has this, that means this, or like, oh, this is good soil. So much of it is, I think a lot of, like, I can manage is things that shift. And so it's not like we're going to look at this and be like, this is good, this is bad. It's kind of like, this is what it is. Now we're going to look at how it shifts over time and how it acts. So the part that we will do out here is the first thing you're kind of doing is looking up top. And so something to check is like what is here. And so like you were saying that you can just pick different pieces. You can look, and even if you don't know, you can go back and check them, but like, okay, what is here? Like, there's some veg grass, there's a grass that is less in the future to learn more about, healing there. So it's just kind of noting what's here. It makes a little bit of dandelion. So what's here? And taking note of that. Then it's also looking at residue. So like if you're looking over here, and grassland is a little bit different than soil. If you are in a system that's like more of a flat system where you're creating open soil and you're putting things under it. What is left on the soil could be information of how active the soil is in being able to break it down. So, like if you're seeing this is a little bit bigger and fast and it's hard to know, is it this year, last year, if you're looking at something you're like, I know I planted this year, and you have to put out a big this, and you're seeing something that's still like a leaf or something that you knew you planted like a year ago, that might be a little bit concerning, and it's not being broken down. When was this? Okay. So that's not, so most of this most likely is from September. And this is also like, we're talking about grassland habitat. That's also considered stuff, which is what they can use for their nesting. Some stuff is good, a lot of facts is not there. If you're thinking about grass, you don't want to create, so one thing is like just having something tall, is if you're pulling the whole thing down and leaving it, you can be blocking other things that may not be strong enough to come up. So having an idea of what is left on the ground and how fast it's getting broken down gives you a little bit of idea of how well your soil is.
So this was when they mowed grass and stuff.
This is the one cut.
Are you taking soil duration, uprooting it?
No, not part of the schedule. You know, at the original when things was decided by the there was being made, but then to try to make those outside of the grassland window, we've already done it, but this year we might have been able to, typically with this many getting in with the window.
There was a guy who did it for a while on the farm, and he made, he said it was basically better.
Whenever you get into like this really stiff, like as the grass gets older, just gets different like the lignin is higher, has a higher presence, and that seems to be not as exciting to grazing animals. Like for instance, the leafy stuff is great, but and it doesn't have as much of a higher nutrient content. So like depending on what species you're feeding, like first cut comes from and something more like for if you want a little bit of nutrient content, whereas like the second cut gets the cut with like really deep green, like almost like delicate fields with really big stuff. So that's good, yeah, that's the trickier part, yeah. If it is a farm, so once you cut later on, yeah, you do some one other thing I'd say about the grazing is that the difference in those and the different over time is where, you know, the cut and the drop, and so the nutrients are breaking down from what we've seen before is it's like that feeling to see growth. When you add in the cows, you're adding in a whole other nutrient situation because you're going manure. And the nice thing about cows as well is that you're adding in like different fungi and bacteria that might not going to be present in the So what's in the gut is going to be coming through and feeding the soil, not just in providing the nutrients that are present in it, but a little bit of providing those like digesters that will then tend to have a beneficial interaction with the soil.
There's also the effect of
last thing to do while we're out here is to get a sense of water. So something that you would want to know is like, is it really fishy or like these things here, whereas like adult, which makes sense to be a little bit higher up than that water is really hot. Yeah, so I can just plot. We can talk about that.
Great. If you're grazing sandy soil, you'll like see where the manure was dropped 2 weeks ago in like a dark green patch of grass. And so I think the sandy soil is like really lovely for grazing because it just like accepts all of that organic matter and incorporates it really kind of quickly and easily, whereas like heavy clay soil, there's a little bit of an added challenge of trying to like impact it, but not impact it like too hard. So
organic matter gets down into the soil much faster.
I think so. Yeah.
And it can be good or bad. I mean, we're talking good in one way and
Yeah, everything is a little bit of a double edge.
So it's knowing like knowing that in your head and then making a decision of like density, like how many cows to put in the spot, and yeah, but knowing what your regrowth is most likely going to be, so you might be able to move cows through it faster, whereas if you go slower regrowth, you're going to wait longer. So it kind of depends. Yeah, again, depends on. It just gives you more information to make better decisions based on what you're aiming for.
So in a grassland where you're not grazing, you're mowing based on different factors, what do you do with this information? I mean, how does that,
If we're not using cows.
yeah, how does that impact how you manage? What can you do to promote types of interesting lagoons or?
Yeah. And someone asked a question earlier, like as far as like getting, like say you did want to add in more clover, that you may have more. I'll let you answer that. I could throw out theories, but
Yeah, I would just say it would like impact soil amendments in terms of an application of lime or other, we have fields in over mountain where on gypsum, and but then it could also kind of move you to seed a field. It could make the difference between kind of a renovation and like turning over fields, tilling it, or using a no-till drill, which actually our Soil and Water District in Columbia County has a rental program right now for a no-till drill, which is really great. And it is a seed drill that you can feed. There's actually two different chambers on this one, so you can feed at two different rates. And depending on the soil and time of year, it can actually cut the soil and drop the seed at varying depths without it's an implement. Yep. So you need a pretty good sized tractor just because it's heavy. So like on this terrain going uphill, it's all ground driven rather than like operated with a PTO. So the main reason why you would need a big tractor is just because it's a big, heavy thing full of seed.
And I assume you would have to do that when the grass was low. So
Yeah,
you would early in the spring, right after you cut.
After a cut or after a burn, if that's also maybe a potential management tool that you can use for seeding. Yeah, a no-till drill.
So I guess if you try to, the tricky part would be like all of those, like what you're saying, you need to know it, like this is a lot, and we'll get a lot in the way. So if you mow, it's something that like, and yeah, that goes into it, like it kind of cuts into the soil and lays the seed directly behind it. But it's just, the tricky thing with soy, like machinery that's for bare soil, and then there's machinery that can deal with a lot of things, is that just the technicality of, if it's a bare soil seeder, all the like residue is just gonna like build up. Whereas like the no, actually I think it cuts. Doesn't it have a
the drill cuts. It's got coulters that will kind of open up the soil, drop the seed, and then a roller on the back that'll try to close it back up. And it's tricky because it's all timing based, and you have to think about like what's, even if you mow and you have an inch of grass or something, if it's during its really active time of year, then probably what you're putting in the ground right in that moment is going to have a chance to compete for nutrients and sunlight. I don't think it probably would, but in the fall, you could do that, or early in the spring, depending on what you're feeding and what the field area looks like. There's also kind of there's different plants that work well to do broadcast or overseeded. I think they're like a really easy thing, even on a big scale like this, is the frost seed red clover. If you're looking for a different composition that includes legumes, so that would be essentially when you're still, like when maple sap is growing, when it's freezing at night and warm during the day, you can use that frost to activate and crack open the seed. And so you can drive over these fields and use a cone broadcaster or anything and apply clover, and you'll see that in the first year or two. which would really make a big difference.
What are some other examples other than that?
Right, and some people do it with trefoil too. Trefoil is another legume that, yeah, bird trefoil. It's not a native plant. Yeah, I don't know if you can do that with that. That's, yeah, trefoil is, I live on a hill in Austerlitz where nothing grows, but trefoil works for some reason. So
That's a legume.
it's a legume, yeah. It's kind of like the rock farmer's alfalfa.
The veg might be produced with the bigger seed. It's harder for it to get in.
And this must be for like raising or staying, like you can do it for like the bird.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it could have an effect on like the whole habitat in terms of adding nitrogen into that cycle.
Yeah, and then, yeah, kind of bringing it back to the birds, like all of this, like learning how this works and how we're interacting with this is all kind of along that basic idea of like, we're going to be paying attention to like what's growing, and then knowing that like, if we have healthy soil here that we're continuing to manage for, we're going to have healthy plants, we're going to have healthier birds. And that's there's a lot of details within that, but that's kind of what we'll be monitoring over time to make sure all of those are going in the direction towards the management goals. The other thing I was just going to mention that you were kind of saying, like, what if you don't use cows, is in thinking about, because one of the tricky parts is, like, if you are waiting till they're really tall and you cut them and you lay them down, like, it is kind of a deep coverage. Another option could be the equipment that you're using. So there are a couple different mowers that can cut something tall, but cut it like multiple places. Yeah. And then it's a little bit more spread out. So that could be an option that, like, if that's, I don't know if that is an option down the line, but to try to see, like, well, how does everything come up if we mow it that way? So there's other ways to kind of move around. And then monitoring or keeping track of, like, is that not good enough resting material? So, like, does that affect the bird?
Right. Also, like the rodents and insects, sometimes they'll prefer that high fat, but then you get to this breaking point where new plants or the desired plant can't go through the fat. So it's a balancing act. And like last year at Ooms, or at Overmountain, we took hay on a field that often gets brush hogs, and we immediately saw the difference in kind of removing all of that from the top, you know, and giving everything a chance, like for young new growth. But then we started worrying about the short-eared owls because they like to hunt the rodent stuff. You know, all of so much to consider.
And that's the same thing with soil. Like, say you are addressing one nutrient deficiency. Like, I guess you think of it as kind of like what's your like logjam. So like, you may address that one, and then it's able to come up to here, and then you hit another like this one. You know, if we raise this one, then it can come up a little bit more. So it's not like, oh, I solved the phosphorus problem, we're good. It's like now we're going to pay attention to what's next, like what's to eat, and then so that's why I feel like really the key is to getting to know your land, like what's growing, how does it grow, what your soil looks like. The more you can learn about it, the more information you have to then make some good decisions, no matter what you're working towards. The other thing I want to say, if there is anyone here who does not actually own their own land, and you're interested in good soil health practices, I don't think I can say enough how impactful it is to support businesses that you know are managing land well, and so farmers that you know are focused on soil health, because you know folks are managing land. You may not have land, but you can make a big impact by supporting the businesses that are supporting it. Are there any before we start walking? Oh, I guess I'll say really quickly in your packet. So there's the map of the soil map that we have of this property, and then there is the information about the soil that we looked at, and then there's that NRCS in-field crop land assessment that some of it is helpful and some of it might not apply. A lot of them go to like yes or no questions, and then on the back of that sheet, it kind of has some information on like what, if you said yes or no to this, like what area you might want to focus on. And then the other sheet is from Dairy One about how to take a soil sample. And those, again, depending on what you're interested in, those could range from like $15 to like hundreds of dollars, kind of based on how much information you would like. Are there any last questions? So there's that is through, I think, our GIS software.
Like how often, like I suggest it is what it is pretty consistently until you mentioned,
for like what the soil types are.
yeah, like you don't have to do it every 10 years,
No,
20
they-
years, it just is what it is.
That's more
Yeah.
like
In your
geological.
lifetime.
Yeah.
And Web Soil Survey is a great resource for that. Because you can get lots of information for that. And then the key to remember with Web Soil Survey is we're not specifically talking about your land, just the soil class. Right. You'll get a map that shows your land and the soil types that are there, and then the descriptions that are like with the Ooms map. So we'll send a link in the follow-up email through the website Web Soil Survey, and it's pretty straightforward. You can enter an address. You can click on the map to create a space if it doesn't have an address, or you want to make a broader piece. And then you basically, there's a whole lot of places to navigate to go to the soil type, to read what the soil type says about it, how it's got like forestry, like it's got a bunch of different ways in which you can interact with land, and if it's in theory productive or not productive, how to use that. Yeah.
And I just want to, I'm sorry, I just want to add, because Cameron, I think, made a great analogy of like thinking of the result of like a blood panel. I always think of it too, like working with livestock. When I was young, if there was like any animal with an issue where we had to call the vet, I would like essentially be in trouble if I didn't first take the animal's temperature. Like, if you call the vet, you gotta at least know the animal's temperature. And similarly, like with soil, like if I'm trying to like achieve some goal, whether it is growing food for humans, growing food for animals, creating habitat, and there's something getting in the way of that. Like the first step is just like looking at the soil, trying to understand the soil. But on the flip side of that, like sometimes the food, grazing, habitat is like all part of the means to achieve healthy soil. And healthy soil is a really good goal in and of itself. And I think that, you know, we could have a whole nother full day about like the global effects of soil health, and how kind of stewarding your plot of land and healthy soil on your land can have these impacts on a you know, much more global level.
I was just going to add that part of this is part of this work is through a soil health grant that we're working on through American Farmland Trust, and so I'm also happy if you guys need like more specific resources. Feel free to contact me. I'm happy to follow up with more resources based on what you're looking for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Okay. So now let's do that. So, and does this all take place using like the dirt? It should be like this. Okay. So, now what we can get a sense of, next is, does someone have my water bill?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay. What? Um, okay. Okay, so look at this guy out. Can everyone see? Oh, okay. So we want to get a sense of like, what are the reefs doing? Where are they? How do they look? What life is in here? Like, is other things that are interesting is looking at soil color. That's just another thing to give you information. Which you asked me, do you know? I know that there's like a soil. How do you guys use the soil color? I don't feel like it's that good information. Like,
I'm not a soil scientist, so I think we're recently and
Okay.
my expertise.
there is a tool to look at based on soil. You also need to factor in if it's drier or wetter. It's going to be a different color when it's wet and it's wet. So I find it helpful to as far as tinker. And so we can set the metal. So then if we're getting a sense of root, something that the thing I'm noticing, so this is the old bad kind of people. And then just getting a sense of like these are, there are roots that are going all the way down. So that's really this note. It's giving you a sense of like you can look at roots to get a sense of compaction. If you see like, oh wow, there's nothing, there's no like grass full blossom yet, but it seems like all the roots here. That gives you an idea, like maybe you're dealing with some compaction, something that when you read with those feet that go to where they came. So that can be based on a lot of compactions with air and water. It could be. It also to note is like what the species is. Like if it's a grass, the grasses are pretty strong. So they've got pretty strong roots. So if you have something like a grass that you know has the potential to really get into something and it's not, that would be the case there saying more about wildlife. So that's good to note the rooting depth. And then then I'm also looking for like signs of so that's good. Like you've got some serious roots in here. Pulling it together. So that's also something that can be helpful to note. But then I'm also trying to look for like, am I finding like holes where earthworms were? Am I seeing some insects? So you're getting a sense of like what larger species are in here. A little hard as well, but like potentially that could be like a little egg or it could be like cut off in that dirt. But ideally you want to see like, 3 or 2 yards isopods. So that's helpful. They're not so much like soil dwellers here. Actually, things that they do not say. And some of that can be like so just not being like earthworms. Sometimes you can get your not. This doesn't seem too surprising to me. Like I wouldn't. This doesn't seem too scary. Like some of the things I'm noting too, like see how like the soil had like little balls. Where those are like little soil aggregates. And that's also a good thing that's both from the root, and it's also from like the what is on the surface of earthworm, that whatever that substance is tends to create like a little bit of balling at the soil. You can get problem thing because again, like another thing is very important in soil is air. Like you want it in there because it gives possible compaction and all the other things that it is. So that the like pool to shiny ball, they get this thing. Yeah, it's something to do. So like when we get to stuff into like, oh, in this pod I saw 2 different people. And then that's something to compare. Like the next time we do this, like, oh, we know there's 3, and then a couple years later we know there's 5. Like that would be thinking that we're doing something right, and then knowing what those are. Or the opposite, like, oh, that, like, especially you're going to learn out, things, what's going on. Now, really, kind of messy, the next part of this one, just do all those things, just to do. Another thing to note, this would look very different if you did this in the spring. So noting your kind of year, because when you have some dieback, or even if you mowed, if you just mowed, the above ground growth tends to reflect the root growth roughly. So if you mow, then the plant's gonna generate cut nutrients to some of these deeper roots and come back a little bit. So it's also like if you're doing this, it's good to do it at the same time each year, so that you're not getting a difference that's just based on just people in the good. So this makes sense to use that this much growth up here, projected there, so that also makes sense to look at the data generally. I've already touched on this. Is there a better time of year in the soil? Not necessarily. I tend to do it in the fall. The really important thing is to do it the same time of year. Not like same day, but like, same less is probably a good idea. So then we're getting yeah. What kind of planting do you take that you go east or you get a plant like that? So that depends on what you're thinking about. So, or what you're growing. If I'm here, if we're interested in grassland management, the soil that is going to be interacting with the grass is somewhat neat. So a general rule of thumb is about a shovel depth. But if you're basically you're getting the information from the depth that you're going. So if you're growing grass, I was probably say a shovel depth. Almost anything else I would say a shovel depth. If you're getting into trees, that might be a little bit different. To generate a shovel. I do have a lab. Where you're sending it, and then you can both call them. Do you like and I grabbed, as an example, there's one that's on a sheep brand that I've used in the past, called Berry One, and so I do have that for you guys. That sort of like how to pick up a sample. When you're sampling, you want to get a sample from multiple spots because you don't want to get some weird outlier. And you don't necessarily want to sample from something that is weird. Because when it's not what it's average deal with. So, in this case specifically, but it's, what I've done in the past is somewhere in the ballpark of like 8 spots where I've grabbed soil from. I tend to use a hand trowel to help yourself not make a pattern that you're not realizing you're making a pattern. Is I'll just like tuck it and then dig wherever it lands. Unless I'm trying, or if there's a new spot, I'll just debate it. And so if say this was a hand shovel, a hand trowel, it's going in. There's also soil cores that you can just do it with a shovel. So like I did with this one, it's going in that depth. I did not ever turn in a soil that has all of this in it. I've mostly done it when it's going familiar with soil. That would be something you should maybe ask a little bit more about. Because you're trying to get rid of, you want to take off the like residue layers, so this is getting part of what you do to make the best of the data matter, which is basically the stuff you have here, this in process that you can take down. And so if there's extension a lot of lift, when it would count as a little better, but it's not actually in the soil, so you want to do a clear off for that. And then just get that, like, if you do a little bit of you. Then you put it in a all eight circles in here, mix it up really good, and then depending on where you're sending it, it'll say like cut the soil. You don't want it to be super dry, you don't want it to be super wet, so it will also tell you like maybe let it if it's really wet, like let it clean out a little bit. And then say it's 2 cups, you put that into a Ziploc bag, you label it how they want to label it, fill out the form, tell you to fill out the form, and then you mail it, and they let you know. You could also your photo, you can just have exactly like what you think that you're there, exactly, like, then I'll get out. Sure. I'll speak to your crop. pH is always really helpful because that will tell you like are you eating nutrients, like very, very basic. So vegetables it's like one about pH. So that's that's like step one. So that's why a lot of times it's pretty common for people to start lime because lime kind of helps in that soil this being just directly to what makes a lot of the network. So that's a big one. That's one. Then if you're looking at the nutrients, say if you're dealing with a deep house, you're dealing with something that doesn't get a lot of rain and you're putting in a lot of compost. Animal-based compost tends to be higher in phosphorus. If you're getting higher phosphorus used in your soil spending time, that's something particular if you're near water that you're going to manage because the higher the phosphorus levels in your more like growth in the waterway that is careful. So say you had a heat house, you would want to stop using animal-based compost because it does have that higher phosphorus. And you could shift to something that's a little more specific to, depending on what you're needing, like nitrogen is generally what you need because that's something that gets used to safely. So nitrogen is just how to get nitrogen without that thing goes like a lot of different ways. I've used like feathermeal and like a rock stock. So it's kind of depends on what you need and how to like. I think of it compost as like a really broad spectrum, which I think is great because you're still to put it needs from it. But if you have to stay too high, then you really look for a more narrow spectrum, of which you don't necessarily have to go to, thicker fertilizer. There's like feathermeal, the types of that is quality. Really great for you still want to think about that. I think your case is really good. That. I'll let that. Yeah, and similarly to Karen's discussion, like, pH has been a huge thing that I've taken away from even the most basic and inexpensive soil sample on a landscape like this. I would, yeah, where I farm, there were also the soil was obviously acidic based on a lot of the faults that you could see, and then the soil analysis confirmed that to a really extreme degree where I realized that I could potentially spread lime at like what is like mass absorbed each year for a decade. So that's what I've been doing for the last 8 years. I do it when I can get into fields. Again, it's like really heavy wet soil. It's very wet property. So for me, it's usually the fall. So I would probably like over doing it. It's a option for me. And the other thing that I really pay attention to on a big scale like this with the soil organic matter. And
I'm naturally competitive person. So that's kind of the internal competition I have with myself is like always trying to like get that number done. And then just in like the livestock farmer Discord, that's like, hey, my name's Pat, my solar model is like to the 4%. And, and then we compete in that way. And there's some in the area that, have been occasionally grazing and like really, intensively managing their grasslands for 30 plus years. And they have this like soil organic matter that I've only ever heard about as it's like a fairy tale. And it's like 10, 12% pick on a crazy stuff. So that's for me, yeah, grazing is like my biggest kind of tool in my toolbox. You can spreading and trying to work with plant kind of life cycle. So you can increase soil organic matter just by mowing grass with the right palm and kind of keeping grass from being stressed and going to seed early. If you're kind of nurturing grass and keeping it vegetative, it can be putting a lot into the soil. And then the species to consider like the things like nitrogen and trying to keep a good composition that can if soil organic matter is the goal. But yeah, I think I always talk about cattle as like being a tool to impact the land, and it's kind of the biggest tool I have. So it's like with a sledgehammer, like you can have a great impact. So that can be kind of daunting and scary, and it can have a negative impact if you're not very intentional about how you're kind of swinging it. But if you have these goals of building soil organic matter or affecting grasslands in certain ways, and for me, cattle are the most impactful way that you use that.
Another interesting thing about this, so we read the quad, to look for is you can tell all the rates in the unit. So getting a sense of like, oh, this is putting in the unit. So these darker colored rates are going to be the older ones. And the smallest ones, they're like the lightest colored white. So like this is gonna be an AME. So it's great to see that balance in there as well. Make you beautiful as well. And then another thing might come across is also basically the training of this something that is like a muscle variety. So like evidence of that like white the part or some guy looking in there that what's you're not going to face this but I'd be that's good thing. That's a good thing. And along the lines of what Pat saying as far as of like having this balance with nitrogen fixture to get nitrogen in those like things that are great to or like the folders are nitrogen fixture. There's also that in here, which is what I mean, so all of these are nitrogen fixtures. This guy, so knowing that and by nitrogen fixtures, they pull nitrogen from the atmosphere and then bring it down this year so that they're slipping into the other things can then do that. That's another one I can definitely get with about anything at day. There's some foods that differ for like older FL. Not necessarily for anything. Yeah, definitely didn't want to get was like a little wet flats. Also the girls, perfect segue. Because soil is a big comparison is just that it's going to talk about management and how that was done. And to do comparisons with the drill where you like it's not been more that it basically hasn't had much bump it for more than one that has been there. So I also got, so part of it was the hedgerow. I think that was rough. And you can tell like a little bit of a color difference. I mean, like not looking around. But you can do that test, with, basically you got, I grabbed like a spot, like just something that's staying together. And if you put it in a container, fill that container up with water, you get a sense of how well the soil stays together. Which is helpful to know because if you're like it says with sudden rain, if your soil is not staying together, it's going to water soil over the water. And so that gives you a sense. This is a little unfortunate because I can't forget what you're saying, and then we get but you can get an idea. This darker one, there's also different colors. So the darker one was from the hedgerow, and this one was from this pod. So what you're looking at, and you like let it sit for like 5 minutes or so, but you can kind of get a sense of how much soil is coming out. So anything that is down here is basically what has fallen apart. This one kind of is fairly. So that's something to note. When this one, so this one will for here. So some of that, how I would think about that in looking at this, it's also knowing that I would best is like this might actually be, this is a lot being held together by the so that's a helpful thing to note. That like say if your foils, if you do work here, may not hold together super well. Some of that also has to do with what the soil type is. So if I'm looking at these, I'm thinking, wow, it's really important to hold it to be paired and holding on. And then I would also be interested in listening a little bit more into why exactly it's coming apart more or not holding together.
I would also probably think that the soil is not as actively supposed wall or more than that. Yeah. In this area, there, but let's hold it together a little bit.
Yeah. So
Based on the game.
this is again, this isn't super accurate because I put in like some loose soil that was already not together, so that was recap, and this is also a big step. So what I can like if I put a hand in here, like this guy's still again studio, like we're dealing a lot with well, if I had had another moment, I might would have moved away so there wasn't as much room to get a better sense, but we probably have a similar different route. But ultimately, this is how to get it better. And so some of that can be like you hear people talking about tillage and different ways to use tillage where it might be more fruitful or false. Tillage can be part of that. That's not something that the more you break up the flags, the more you break up the structure, not pull together. We know that that's not something that's happening here because you're not tilling. So it gives a lot of water holding. The sandier the soil, the more water is going to flow through. It's not going to hold on to water, and that just has to do with the size of what makes up the soil. So another good thing to start with that is like, oh yeah, what is soil type? How does this work? Instead of jumping to all the after soil and soil type method. Oh, it's turning it away. the data for your soil. Something to think about is if you also are going to have a lot of, like what, yeah, you must be able to stay more accessible in the paper. But I guess I'm thinking of like stuffing on soil that failure might be secure as far as like cleaning up the water. Like, are you going to if they have some drainage that you don't necessarily want? Yeah, I look at that.
I would actually probably guess that you could stuff it more densely unless you're like wet water. Just in terms of inhibiting taking past all of it. And then the sandier soil is typically with livestock where you can really like see impact like